if bad things happened, I was somewhere in the realm of it in my career. And so very short time into my career, I think I was off FTO for 6 months. I got into a shooting, and that was a shock for me. And keep moving forward, I was involved in multiple mass fatality incidents. I'd been shot at. I've chased numerous gangsters with guns, done numerous search warrants, which causes a high level of stress. And I remember me and my partner were up in San Luis Obispo County looking for a guy that we knew had a gun that was traversing between the two counties. And him and I started having a conversation about wellness. And at this time, our agency didn't have peer support. We didn't have anything wellness related.
What year is this?
Whatsoever. This would have been in 2016-ish,
Okay.
2015, 2016. And that's really what got me thinking. And I remember the conversation we're having is, should cops see therapists? Like, should we be required to see therapists? So we hire the most mentally tough people in the world probably to get into these positions, but then there's no recourse of action, at least at the time, right, to take care of people.
Welcome, everybody. My guest this week is Jarrett Morris. Jarrett's been a cop for 18 years. He's a lieutenant with a sheriff's department here in California. He got into a shooting early in his career, and that, combined with all the other trauma that comes from the job, Jarrett realized that not only was he not encouraged to address his mental health, he was struggling with it. He started the peer support group within his organization, and he's also co-founded Dose of Ethos. It's a company committed to helping first responders improve their physical and mental health. This intro is short and sweet, so let's get into it. Here's episode 120 with Jarrett Morris.
We can't go forward unless we go backwards. So tell me about where's hometown? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Santa Barbara County. Actually, the town of Lompoc when I was growing up, is a big Air Force Base town. We have a federal penitentiary. So those are really the two economic mechanisms that made that town for what it was. Grew up with a normal family. My dad worked for Lockheed Martin and did stuff launching rockets into space. Was always gone. And
He was gone because of Lockheed Martin?
Yeah. Just traveling a lot overseas, across the country, doing those things. But I was very much, I'm a millennial, but I was very much growing up where I left when the sun came up and I came home when the sun came down. It's a very independent lifestyle, learned by trial of error type thing growing up.
Big family, small family?
Small family, so just me and a younger sister. Spent a lot of time just doing our own thing, but spent a lot of time with my grandpa, and that's what kind of got me into law enforcement. He was a law enforcement officer up in Sacramento. Him and I did a lot of gun shooting, hiking, horseback riding, just adventurous type stuff. So that's where I credit a lot of who I am today is to that man, and got me into the career.
Was he already retired, or was he already off the job at that point when you were growing up?
I think he retired when I was 9 or 10. He retired as a deputy chief at Sac PD. But I got to see a little bit of it. Got to hear all the cool war stories, child appropriate war stories, but
the edited versions.
Yes.
So was he down here in Southern California, or were you going up to hang out with him a lot up in the Sacramento area?
Going up to hang out with him a lot in Sacramento. They ended up moving into Placer County up into the mountains. But I spent most of my childhood summers, like elementary, middle school, up spending time with him.
Was it because of your dad's work with Lockheed Martin that took him and your mom originally to Lompoc?
Yes. Yeah.
Growing up, what you mentioned hanging out with your grandfather, but what other activities, sports, anything like that?
So I did sports, the normal play baseball, was my big one when I was a little kid. Growing up, I kind of distanced myself from sports. Just I'd rather be riding my bike around and creating my own adventures. in a middle school. High school, I did a little bit of water polo. But then I really got into student government type activities and kind of, again, it was more independence for me doing my thing. But a lot of hiking, a lot of gun shooting, and really, I keep saying it, but a lot of create my own adventures is really a good definition of my childhood.
You mentioned student government. Did you have interest in politics as an adult or for the long term?
I think it was a way for me to find a path to do something, because when I was in middle school, much like most middle schoolers, I was pretty lost. Like, I don't know really what I want to do. I had an idea I wanted to be a cop or go into the military, but I got to a point where I was like, I really don't know which way I'm supposed to go. And again, I was very independent, not a lot of parental influence, specifically, and student government gave me some purpose in high school. And so it was, I wouldn't say even now I have any aspirations for any political career, but it was just a path for me to go down.
Were you driven by academics?
Yes. Yeah.
The college aspect, was that something that was on your radar coming towards the end of high school?
Yeah, we'll get into college, but yeah, it was, because I was always taught that's the way you had to go. I wasn't prepared for college. I wasn't prepared to go that route. But I was a good high school student, really good grades, but I wasn't mature enough to move on to high school. To college.
Where'd you end up going to college?
Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
So stayed relatively local.
Yes.
But it was enough, I'm reading between the lines, kind of got a little bit off the rails?
It did. So, again, I was lost, trying to figure out where I wanted to go. Being in student government and doing a lot of event planning, I wanted to go in and maybe start doing like corporate events. So that was kind of a different route, with always in the back of my mind, I should be a cop or I should be in the military. And I went that route, lived my first year in the dorms while living here. I got a job at a local radio station and doing events. And through that, I ended up being a radio DJ, and that paid me a lot of money.
You don't have a voice for radio at all.
It's so crazy, I know. But going down that route, they paid me a lot of money, and so money became a drive for me rather than academic success. And so one overtook the other, and I ended up dropping out to my parents' lovely consent.
Of all things, to be a radio DJ.
To be a radio DJ. And that was an adventure. I had a good time. Learned a lot about interacting with people. But ended up, my co-host and I, we were at one of the local radio stations here. They ended up reformatting from a top 40 station to a country station. And we ended up getting fired in the middle of the night without even knowing it. And so we show up to work and no longer have a job. And I decide I'm going to move back home and I'm going to start applying for the sheriff's office. That was like my immediate thought. And my co-host went off to back home to Louisiana. Funny story for him is he continued the radio path. He's now a multi-millionaire radio DJ in New York City. And I went the cop path, and I'm a public servant. So
you've already mentioned that you were making really good money. So I'm assuming are you 20, 21 at this point?
Yeah, I was 21 when I got fired from the radio station. Yeah. Being
that it happened literally overnight, it wasn't enough to keep you like focused and keep going down, like your buddy said, or your buddy did. And granted, he went home to Alabama, but just to find another radio station.
So I didn't have the guidance or the forethought at that point in time in my life to go and continue that. To me, it was like, oh, this is over. Now what? And I think it was the path that was going to lead me to law enforcement nonetheless. Like I remember wanting to be a cop since I was a little kid, and it just took me a windy road to get there, if you will. And I think that was just the moment, the catalyst that got me there.
So it's almost kind of that thing of that being law enforcement was what you wanted to get to, and they just kind of forced your hand and said, "Oh, you're making an easy decision for me."
Yeah, I 100% believe that.
Was the show you were hosting, was it syndicated nationwide, or was it a local radio station?
It was a local radio station. At the time, it no longer exists, but it was Sly 96 here in San Luis Obispo. And it was we were doing the morning show, so it was a lot of fun. Basically, talk radio, the podcast before podcast, if you will, right? And so we were doing that, having a good old time. But yeah, it was just a local radio station.
You ever miss it?
I do. Yeah, I do sometimes. I still think about maybe going to get like a part-time job at a radio station, but too busy with the work and the family.
You could do the crime report.
Yeah, I should do that.
So you made the decision, I'm going to go law enforcement. How many agencies did you test with?
2. Yeah, I tested with the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office, my hometown agency, and then the Los Angeles Sheriff's Office, because my uncle was a captain at that agency. And so I'm like, I could go down there. It's a big agency. They're busy. I want to be busy. I want to be that kind of cop. I want to be busy. So I applied at both and ended up getting my conditional letter from both agencies on the same day. And right, wrong, and different, I chose to stay
close to
Santa
home.
Barbara. Yeah.
Do you think long-term, any regrets kind of working in the same area where you basically grew up?
I'd be lying if I said I'd never have had regrets over it, but I think ultimately this was the best decision. I know this community. I love this community. I like protecting this community, and I know who's who on both sides of the street, if you will, right? And we don't have, and we'll kind of get into it, I'm sure, but we don't have the politics that LA County does. We don't have the structure. We have a little bit more freedom than deputies do in LA County, if you will. And I didn't have to spend 8 years in the jail either. So that was.
What year did you come on?
I got hired in 2005.
So you're 18 years in ish.
Yep. I'm going on 19.
And you've mentioned your grandfather, who high ranking deputy chief. You mentioned an uncle who was a lieutenant. You got some shadows to kind of climb out from behind in your family. Did that motivate you throughout in your career?
I think unintentionally. I've always been a driven individual, and it gives me something to aspire to. I do think often, like, hey, I know he's no longer with us, but making my grandpa proud and making a difference and doing what I love to do.
Did you ever end up going back and finishing college?
I did. Yeah. I ended up going, taking the online route, which was very good for me.
Especially working shift work.
But yeah, I ended up doing online and moving to that.
Well, as far as your parents, now obviously becoming a DJ didn't make them that happy, but with all the law enforcement in your family, were they supportive of you going towards that career route?
Yes and no. I think my mom was terrified of me becoming a cop, and she grew up in a law enforcement family and knew the different struggles that correlate with that. My dad, yeah, he was proud that I was going that route. But I think he later shared he's always very scared of me being out there. So, yeah.
And especially the times, well, I know some will say every generation that comes on, we all hear that story when we're starting out. Oh, you don't know what it was like when I started. And then you get some years on and you look at the young guys. It's just an evolution.
Correct.
But from a parent's perspective, you got to, especially the last 2 or 3 years, it's definitely harder to, as a parent, sit back and kind of go, wow, I don't know if I want my son or my daughter out there.
Yeah, and I think, again, generationally, they had the same problems in the 70s. They had the same problems in the 90s. Obviously, ours are more publicized and more in public view. But yeah, it's always a dangerous career, and if we don't prepare ourselves and train and do the things we need to do to be proficient at our job, yeah, it's definitely more scary. But I think I've always done a good job of making sure I'm doing some training. I've lacked aspects in years, and done good things like jiu-jitsu we were talking about before recording. But like firearms proficiency, I wasn't always training that. I wasn't always doing that like I should be. Much better now that I'm not always out on the street. But yeah, I think it is scary for parents. It is scary for loved ones and children that have law enforcement figure in their family, and I do notice that and respect that with them.
Did your uncle give you any advice? Because you said your grandfather had already passed by the time you became a cop. Did your uncle give you any advice?
Kinda. Him and I had a weird relationship. He's kind of a standoffish guy, but he's been very supportive, very proud of me. I don't remember too much advice, honestly, from him being younger.
Put you on the spot for your coworkers. So what are your aspirations as far as rank?
Well, it's getting out there. I'll start it out like this. So I'm a lieutenant currently at the sheriff's office. Next for us is commander. I have roughly probably 10 years ish to go before I retire. And, there's some rumors that I'll be running for sheriff, in, 5 years. So we'll see.
Going back to those high school days of, student council and stuff, getting the electoral vote.
Yeah. And, it's been very interesting for me in my career because I was very gung ho, like a cop's cop, wanting to, arrest all the bad guys, find the guns, find the drugs. And I eventually got into a spot where I wanted to lead and take care of the people. And I very much believe that you take care of your people, they'll take care of the mission. And, that's been my driver for the past, 5-6 years as a leader in our organization. So, I want to continue that. I want to take care of our people and make sure that they have what they need, especially like you mentioned a few minutes ago, the times that we're in with law enforcement. So that's kind of the driver. So I think that's a possibility, but I want to get high up as I can so I can be more influential and take care of our people.
I think when you cross that bridge, going from being what we perceive as a cop's cop, the guy or girl who feels they want their peers to look at him as never dropping the ball, always carrying their share of the load. And for many of us, sometimes we kind of get into that closed-minded mindset of, I just want to be a worker bee. And then you cross that bridge and you get into leadership and management. And there is this shift where you get as much, if not more, enjoyment in making sure that your people have what they need and that you're looking out for them. And I think for me, what I try to impart to people is the importance of, don't think about promoting to leadership as losing the ability to do stuff. It's you're gaining the ability to do more for more people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we often see, excuse me, I'm sure you've seen it too. We see the individuals that do it because they're getting close to retirement. So like, hey, I need to bump up that retirement a little bit. And that's sad to see because they end up usually being lackluster managers. But I remember when I became a sergeant, I was put on a squad. It was a smaller substation. It's 4 brand new guys out of the academy. And I was sitting there thinking, these guys know nothing. Like, they have zero idea of what they're doing other than what they learned on FTO and in the academy, right? And so it was a challenge for me, and getting them into different events, getting them into different experiences was a lot of fun for me. And that's where I developed that, this is more fun than chasing the gangsters that I've been doing for so many years. And I truly enjoy it, and I truly believe in it. And it's worth saying again, it's people first, mission second. And that's what needs to happen.
And to put it in a term, and not in a dismissive way, but it's kind of like being a parent and seeing your child grow and improve and thrive. It's the same way when you're in that position, even as an FTO, when you've got that new person in the car and they're just out of the academy and they don't know anything, you have such an impact on what kind of officer or deputy that they can be in their career by how you treat them and how you train them.
Yeah, I often use that. It's like raising more children. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody that works with me, but it's true. Like, you need to encourage them. You need to help push them forward. You need to help make them grow. And if you don't, then they're not gonna have the support they need to be better for themselves and push themselves.
Are you finding that, and not to put you on the spot, and if you want to edit this out, we will. Are you finding that the politics of San Bernardino County is easier to operate in or more difficult to operate in from your experience, especially the last couple of years?
Yeah, Santa Barbara County, but yeah, so our county is very divided, and maybe most counties are like this, but we have a very liberal South County, a very conservative North County, and I think we're very lucky in Santa Barbara. We are supported overall by the community. We don't have a lot of the problems that Ventura even has, or Los Angeles County has, or more the big metropolitan cities. We didn't see any rioting during 2020 in our county. Saw a couple of protests, but I think we're very lucky. We're very supported, or we're very supported in our county, and it doesn't usually create us much headaches.
So it didn't have much bleed over from the surrounding, I'll say, Southern California area, but largely probably more of the Bay Area to the north and LA to the south.
Correct. Yeah. We've been, I hate to use this term, but law enforcement in our community has been getting defunded since 2008 with the collapse, and it's been kind of dwindling away ever since. And we're starting to rebuild, but we didn't see any movement or push for us to lose large amounts of our budget or lose any of our abilities. Obviously, our law enforcement officers have obviously had to change some of their way they do things over the years with various different political reasons. But we're very lucky in our county.
You mentioned potentially running for an elected official position. Does the idea of politics and polling and all of the ancillary stuff that comes from getting to be elected ever seem too daunting, or something maybe I don't really know if I really want to go that route yet?
Yes. Yeah, it does. I do feel like I'm a cop's cop, and getting into the whole political realm is a whole new world for me, and it would be if I choose to do that. However, I think somebody like me is what our agency may need in 5 years, and I'm willing to take that leap. I know Sheriff Mark Lamb pretty well, and I talked to him a lot, and he gave me a pretty good piece of advice, and that was just be yourself and let the chips fall where they may. And so I'm not really interested in playing those games of talking crap about anybody that could potentially run against me, or about the past sheriff or anything like that. And so I think that's what I'll latch onto if I do make that decision, is just be myself, push what is the best for our community, best for our agency, and around how I believe things should work.
You mentioned previously, and I think we all kind of go through this at points in our career. Maybe we come out of the academy and we're running 100 miles an hour and we're dedicated to all the ancillary training we need to do, even to the point we're doing it in our free time. And then life gets in the way. And so then you start falling back on just what the department provides. Was there a catalyst for you? Because you specifically referenced shooting. Was there something that caused you to then dig your heels in, so to speak, and start advancing your training?
So I was very lucky through my career so far. I started in the jail. I did 18 months as a custody deputy in our jail, went to the law enforcement academy, and did about 18 months on patrol. And then is that the normal route for your county? You become a custody or a custody aide first before you go to the academy? So we have two tracks.
Okay.
We have a custody track and then a law enforcement track. And I applied for both. I ended up getting the custody track first, with the goal in mind. I'm not staying in this jail.
Right.
Hated working in the jail. Hated it working in that jail. However, one of the best things that ever happened to me was working in that jail. I learned how to talk to people. I learned an element of the world that I really never had to deal with before. and really, I believe that's what pushed me into working ultimately the gang unit and narcotics, and I did that for a decade almost. And if it wasn't for that jail, I wouldn't have been successful. I believe in the custody, in the gangs and narcotic realm of the world.
If you embrace it, it's a great learning environment.
Yeah. And I actually had a guy. It was an inmate. He was a gangster. It was in jail for kidnapping and torturing a couple teenage girls. And I remember him like telling me, "Hey, I want to tell you something." And he was much older than me at the time. I was probably 22 years old at this time. Not a whole hell of a lot of life experience. But he told me, if you learn how to talk to people in here and treat them like people, speaking of the inmates, then you're going to be much better off than if you don't. And I took that to heart, even though it's from this evil person. I thought it was some good advice. And I learned how to talk to these inmates, talk to these gangsters. And that's what projected me forward and ultimately allowed me to start working really, really well with informants and building cases and getting guns and drugs off the street. And I still use that to today when I'm working with people that I can't necessarily stand, but treat them like people.
You just boiled it down to the absolute essence of it. When you're dealing with people, just treat them with respect. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get a lot further in almost every situation. It doesn't have to be just law enforcement. If you just treat people with respect, they're going to in turn, maybe not necessarily treat you with respect, but they'll at least acknowledge that you're treating them with respect.
Correct. Yeah. And what's great, I'm sure my dad and my grandpa and other people of influence taught me that when I was a kid, but it took this evil person to pound it into my brain, if you will. And it was beneficial.
Now, having the opportunity to work as a custodial assistant before you became a cop, did that shorten the time then, or did that alleviate the time of having to work the jail as a deputy?
No. So I got hired as a custody deputy, so it was just a deputy, and then we don't have that job class, so I moved over to deputy. So our law deputies don't specifically have to work in the jail.
Oh, okay. Because I know when I came on back in the 90s, you talk about the extended times. So my buddies who were LA County Sheriff, they were in there 5-6 years. Mm-hmm. And so it starts getting to be that tipping point. You know, you spend 2 or 3 years, and if you embrace it, it's a great learning environment. You spend 5 or 6 years, and all of a sudden, I think you take a young kid, it starts having potentially more of a negative impact than a positive impact by the time they hit the road.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you're really just spending 12 hours at a time in jail is the way I looked at it, right? And you're babysitting these, most of the time they're much older than me, grown men that I'm having to babysit, tell them when to eat, tell them when to sleep, move them from different things that they need to be doing. And it was torture, but it was one of the best things for my career ultimately down the road.
So you don't have a transition story yet. You're a few years and potentially even longer, but you've already kind of put your foot into an opportunity that could be your transition career. Mm-hmm. And it deals with something that's really important to me in the sense of officer health and wellness. How did that come about? And tell me about your company.
Yeah, sure. So getting into a little bit deeper into my career, I have a black cloud. Like I am a shit magnet through and through. And if bad things happened, I was somewhere in the realm of it in my career. And so very short time into my career, I think I was off FTO for 6 months. I got into a shooting, and that was a shock for me. And keep moving forward, I was involved in multiple mass fatality incidents. I'd been shot at. I've chased numerous gangsters with guns, done numerous search warrants, which causes a high level of stress. And I remember me and my partner were up in San Luis Obispo County looking for a guy that we knew had a gun that was traversing between the two counties. And him and I started having a conversation about wellness. And at this time, our agency didn't have peer support. We didn't have anything wellness related.
What year is this?
Whatsoever. This would have been in 2016-ish, 2015, 2016. And that's really what got me thinking. And I remember the conversation we're having is, should cops see therapists? Like, should we be required to see therapists? So we hire the most mentally tough people in the world probably to get into these positions, but then there's no recourse of action, at least at the time, right, to take care of people. And
not to mention that the job and the environment causes you to not embrace your emotions or your feelings.
Correct. Yep. Is always the suck it up buttercup mentality, right? And so then about this time, right after I get into a very bad car accident at work, puts me out of work for about 6 months, allows me to start thinking more. But what I started realizing is that I was suffering from a lot of stress. And right after going back to work, I get promoted and I leave our special investigations unit. So remember, I'd been there for 10 years. I've been running and gunning for 10 years, essentially, right? And I felt like I had the flu for months. And going to the doctor's like, you don't have the flu. You're coming down from all those years of stress and working through it. But what I didn't realize is the impact on my health, the impact on my family, the impact on my wife, and all those different things. And so it was about that time. So 2017, end of 2017, I started our peer support program at the sheriff's office and started pushing away from the suck it up buttercup that it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way type mentality. And realizing there's a lot of, and not to be derogatory to anybody, but there's a lot of messed up people working in my smaller agency. And so started doing some research. We ended up hiring a psychologist. Her name is Dr. Sherilyn Lee. She works a lot in Southern California. And her and I partnered up and started really building our program at the sheriff's office. And that led me into, at least at the time, there was not a lot of resources out there about wellness, and it was still something that was spinning up. Obviously, suicide rates across the country for law enforcement officers is extremely high. And so a friend of mine and I, who we grew up in the department together, we started a company called Dose of Ethos, and really what it was at first was just a resource. Hey, here's different things that you can use or contacts you can have to make yourself a little bit better. And that ultimately ran into me writing articles for Police One about wellness for law enforcement officers. And now we're currently in the process of developing different classes, more of tactics with the wellness, overall wellness built into it. And because I believe, like we were talking about, being proficient at different things like jiu-jitsu and shooting, like if you're proficient at those things, it's going to help you become a little bit better even for your overall wellness. And so we have that in mind, and we're working through those different things.
Well, and at the end of the day, putting egos aside, one of the biggest stressors for this job is that fear of the inability to handle yourself. And like it or not, there are a lot of officers out there who are not adequately trained. And so the fear of getting into a confrontation is a stressor every single day of their life. So being more physically prepared, whether it be physical fitness, training jiu-jitsu, then you add into that better proficiency with your handgun. All those little things are stress reducers. But I'd like to go way back to when you and your partner first started talking about it. Was there, in hindsight, was there stuff that you were experiencing that maybe you were ignoring or pushing off prior to having that initial discussion?
100%. So for me, it's kind of been twofold. So I was on the career side. I was taking all the things that I'd been through and telling myself, this is what, even my shooting, right? Brand new cop. I get in the shooting. It was a suicide by cop incident with me and two other deputies. And I remember telling myself, well, this is what I was trained for. This is what I do. And no follow-up. Like, we'd go see, like in a normal OIS incident, you go see the psychologist. He asks you a few questions and you're out the door. But other than that, there's no follow-up from that.
And you're given the collectively correct answer so you can hit the road again.
Correct. So then I take that, I shove it down. Getting shot at by a deranged individual a few years later, take that, shove it down. We had a mass shooting in Isla Vista, California. I was there relatively quickly after the deputies did what they had to do, shoved that down. Other mass fatality incidents, other things, just kept shoving all that stuff down, and I wasn't taking care of any of that. I wasn't exercising properly. I wasn't eating properly. Sitting surveillance almost nightly with the team that we were running, and so I'm sleeping 4 or 5 hours a day, doing nothing to take care of myself, right? And that was all building up. But then on the flip side, with even as how bad of picture I'm painting for myself that I was professionally, I was much worse at home. And even to this day, I'm much more comfortable at work and doing that environment, even in the administrative position I'm in now, than I am as functioning at home. And so I'm still working through a lot of those things, even to this day. But to answer your specific question, yeah, I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't doing the things, and all those things led up to it exploding and me having that stress. Probably never diagnosed it specifically with depression, but probably experiencing some depression. Later diagnosed with PTSD, and working through those for many, many years.
When you started the peer support program, that initial step off, what was the response like from the rest of your agency? Were they supportive of it? Did you get, I'm assuming there had to be some that were kind of the old school, like, we don't need that, kind of deal. But overall, what did you get from the other members of your organization when you brought that to the table?
So luckily, I feel like I was well respected within the agency, so I had a little bit more leniency than if it probably was other people that were starting the program, and I later learned other people had tried to start the program but weren't necessarily successful. But I did get both. I got a lot of the guys. I remember sitting at a table one day and we're talking about it, and the vast majority of the table was people of my law enforcement generation. And they're basically trying to laugh me out of the room. But what I did find is I was helping the people that were probably at rock bottom or pretty close to rock bottom. And those were the people that we were able to help and at least provide resources for and get them pointed in the right direction. And luckily, because of companies like the Counseling Team International and First Responders Wellness and those other groups that have made and found culturally competent therapists, we're on a much better path now. But it's been a long road, and I honestly still get from some people of everybody's fine, they're just whining, they're abusing the system, they don't really need help, they just need to suck it up and move on.
For somebody who might be interested in starting a peer support group, you mentioned a couple companies already that are good resources, but any other advice for getting it off the ground?
If you're in Southern California specifically, or the Counseling Team International is a great resource. They have great cheap training available to help you get that started. But if you have nothing else, if you're a smaller agency, if you're a rural agency with not a lot of resources around you, just be that person that is willing to listen and look for resources or tap into your agency's employee assistance program. And honestly, I would say just be the person that's willing to listen and let people get stuff off their chest. And I think that's a good route to start a peer support. And that's what I did. And I did that for a couple of years, just me, myself, and I, in a 800 person agency. So it works, but you need to be persistent. And I'd also recommend that you make sure you're taking care of yourself too when you're taking on all that other stress, which is something I had to learn the hard way as well.
That's what immediately was coming to my head. So you take on this huge responsibility. At the same token, you're kind of in the middle of it yourself. Did you find that maybe at the time you didn't realize it and now you've got the ability to look back, but was it helping you or was it also kind of hurting you?
So I think it was helping me in the sense of I went from chasing bad guys to now I'm supervising and learning how to take care of these younger guys. And it was another resource for me to feel like I'm doing something of purpose. And so I think it was helping me stay on a positive path, if you will. And so obviously a lot of people that get into the PTSI area can go down the path of using substances, having extramarital affairs, being addicted to different things. They can go down that path, right? And so I think staying on a path where I feel like I had a purpose of doing something to help people helped me stay on something that led me to not go down the other path.
And fast forward today, how has it grown within your organization?
Yeah, so we have I'm the manager of the peer support unit. I have Dr. Lee, who's also a manager with me. We have a sergeant that runs the unit, and we have probably about 30 people who work either custody, law enforcement, or civilian realms of the world. And they're very busy, and they do a lot of good work. We're responsible for all the critical stress debriefs. We're responsible for day-to-day contacts, or I call them buddy checks. And we're also providing resources, working closely with first responders wellness, working closely to a couple different organizations who do like equine therapy care, and continuously trying to find different resources of funding to keep the unit going and provide resources for our team. But we have programs in place to supply food alternatives. We're working on physical fitness and financial fitness courses for our employees. So we're doing well. I think your listeners, if they're looking to do something like this, also look at San Diego Police Department. They're light years ahead of the rest of us when it comes to wellness of employees, but they've taken it pretty hard with officer suicides over the years, right? And so they were forced to do so. But we're trying to take things that fit within our culture of our agency and with our employees and slowly adapt them into it. And to be quite honest, retirement's changed since you and I were hired, right? Like it's 50 or 2.7 at 57 or whatever it is, right? For these new guys, we're going to have a bunch of 60-year-old cops running around. And so instead of working 30 years, a lot of these guys are going to be working close to 40 years. And so we're working on ways to adapt that and figure out how do we take care of these younger cops now so that they can make their way into 20, 30, 40 years and live hopefully a healthy retirement.
Are you seeing any changes even at the academy level today where they're talking more about the importance of mental health and addressing it sooner than later?
Yeah, so there's a learning domain now that covers officer wellness. And then for us, we're hitting them right out of the academy, whether it's custody academy or the law enforcement academy with wellness. And even in the hiring stages, we're talking about wellness for them. So they're getting it hiring, they're getting it in the academy, they're getting it after the academy, and then continuing on through their career. And we're even building programs to bring in the families and the spouses to talk about wellness and signs and symptoms you need to look for, things you can do to support them, things they should be doing to support you as a law enforcement spouse. And it's allowing us to get in a culture of law enforcement officers that are more adapt and okay with the term wellness and the understanding again that it's okay not to be okay, but taking steps to get out of that belief. But we've and there's grants, right? There's grants now that the state's giving out to fund officer wellness programs. and it's becoming more acceptable. I think we're getting away from the suck it up buttercup. We still have a generation of law enforcement officers working still that still do firmly believe that, but we're working through
Us old timers are holding on.
It's attrition. We'll get rid of them. It's attrition.
You put yourself in this category, and I'm referring to millennials, and it's all about perspective, because I do think that one of the things that the millennial generation definitely brought to the workforce as a whole, and really into law enforcement, is they look at it more than when you started, definitely when I started, is if I'm not digging this, I ain't gonna stick it out just because of a retirement. Mm-hmm. So they're willing to evaluate their life more freely. The other thing is they were raised with, how do I feel? And as much as the old timers, myself, might sit there and go, oh, suck it up, but that's not the way to be healthy. And so I really think that they get a bad rap, but I do think the millennial generation definitely brought some good things to the workforce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I can't really, I am a millennial, but I'm more of a Gen Xer just because of where I was born.
You're right on that cusp.
Yeah, I'm right on the cusp. But I do agree with you. I think it was culture shock for even me for some of the things that the millennials brought into the workplace. And I know we dig on them about their work ethic, but I'm sitting here now telling you, like, they're out there working just as hard as we are, with much more restrictions than we had when I was working the streets and working gangs. And they're still getting the job done. And what I have to realize, we sit here and we say it's very hard for them. I can't believe that they have to do law enforcement differently than we had to. It's no different to them. They don't know. They hear our stories,
yeah,
but they don't know. And you go out there and you ask them, "Hey, how's it going today?" I'm living my best day ever. They're positive about it. They love being out there, and they are, as you said, taking better care of themselves. Like they, at least in my agency and agency I've been to, like they're probably more fit than than most of us were. They do make better choices. They do some things like we do. They're downing those energy drinks like they're going out of style, but they're also taking time off. They do have, whether you believe it or not, whatever the work life balance, they do cherish their time off. They are taking vacations. They are doing what makes them feel good. Maybe sometimes, depending on who you talk to, the detriment of the agency. But they are out there working. They are volunteering for overtime. They are doing what they need to do to be good cops on the same end.
And I say this often to those my age, late 40s into their 50s. Be careful how big of a rock you throw at the millennials, because we're the ones that raised them. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that you hit the nail on the head. Right or wrong, every generation comes into law enforcement and learns law enforcement by the way the game is played at that time. The worst thing we can do as old timers is sit there and go, rehash or hold on to, well, back when I started. It doesn't matter. The new men and women coming into law enforcement today, coming in 10 years from now, they're all going to do law enforcement a little bit differently. When I first started, I remember the old salts talking about before computers in the cars, and cracking on the young officers. They couldn't spot a hand-to-hand if it jumped out in front of them, because they stayed buried in that computer running license plates. Every old generation complains about how the new guys are doing it. It's just police work. Yeah, I agree. And we're pretty lucky in Southern California, right? We're on the cutting edge of law enforcement compared to the rest of the country. And these young kids that are coming in are doing it the best way they know how. They do have a lot of technology influence, and that causes different stresses and things for them. I work overtime often in our agency, and I still get in the car sometimes, and it takes me a little bit how to figure out how to log in and get the camera started and do all those things. But
And I'm not that far removed from things, right? So things are changing so quick for them, but these kids are so adapted to technology that they're able to adapt to these quick changes of technology. But I honestly do get frustrated with some of the things that they do and how they do them. And some of it's not their fault, such as proactive policing. Like, that's changed a lot because of several different things,
right,
including COVID and everything. And so one thing that we're working through, and it does fall into the mental health realm too, is like, we had a lot of COVID baby cops who are now FTOs, and those cops weren't changed or taught how to be proactive. And so now they're training another generation of cops not to be proactive. And so we're working through that. I think it'll come back after some things happen in the country, but getting cops prepared to getting into those more high stress events more often, like I think we were, is important to recognize, because I think they have isolated, especially in our community, isolated critical incidents. Like when I was young, I felt like we had them like every day. We had a critical incident of some type. But getting them prepared and ready for when things do potentially change and they do become more active and proactive is important too.
I know you use the term that they're proactive policing. And I go back to when I started, and the thing was that I was always told, be inquisitive. Mm-hmm. Go turn over rocks. And if something looks out of place, go check it out. And it's just that basics. Every cop has done it since there was the first police officer. They had an area to work. You get to know your area, and you get to know what's in place and what's out of place. And when it's out of place, don't ignore it. Mm-hmm. You know?
But yeah, I usually, when I became a sergeant, I'd get on my guys because it'd be 40 degrees outside, right? And they'd be driving around with their windows up, their heater on. And I was always the cop of my windows are down, my heater's full blast, like trying to stay warm because I'm trying to take in the environment, right? And they all, still this day, like I bring that up to them, they look at me like you're crazy. Like, it's cold outside. I'm not going to do that. But it's, again, it's fun watching them. I enjoy training and working with them, like in an overtime position, going out and just watching them work, because they're having the time of their lives and they love it, and it's just like when we first started.
Going back to your company, so it's grown to also include fitness training. How was that growth? What was the motivator behind it? You've kind of mentioned it a little bit, but how was that growth in growing that portion of your company?
Man, it was hard. So I wasn't taught growing up how to be physically fit and take care of yourself and exercise. That was something I had to learn over time. I ended up, after I left Special Investigations and getting promoted, I ended up hiring a personal trainer. His name's Nick, and him and I worked on developing a plan for me that was, again, culturally competent to law enforcement officers. So some of those quick movements, I'm not the type of guy that needs to just be totally roided out with muscles, but I want to be enough physically fit that I can take care of myself, that I can keep going, that I can push. And so him and I ended up building, really him with his knowledge, but with my specific guidance, building out programs for me that were law enforcement specific. And so we ended up partnering and putting those programs onto the website. And so there's different ones available. I have one called the Pre-Academy that'll help you get ready for going into the academy, because we're seeing a lot of people working on going in the academy that are overweight and can't do a lot of push-ups, can't do a lot of sit-ups, can't do a lot of pull-ups. And so that program is very specific towards that. And then we have another program called Back to the Streets. It would be for people like me that were working a detective detail and maybe put on a few pounds from doing surveillance and eating McDonald's or Taco Bell every night for dinner.
And every day for lunch.
And every day for lunch and breakfast and everything in between. So working on programs like that. And so we're building out those different programs. Again, we're building out a training program that incorporates close quarters combat, jiu-jitsu, and overall wellness. And that's going to be a 2-day course that we're hoping to launch probably in January, February of this year. And that's going to be, I'm excited about that one. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Is that something, the long-term plan, students come to you or you go to the students, or both?
It's going to be both. So our first one is going to be local in Santa Barbara County. And then we'd be happy to go out and set it up in other locations. I do teach other classes that I travel for, and so that'll just be another one that we'd be happy to travel with.
Now, somebody coming to your website, law enforcement, wants to do the Back to the Streets program. Are you building in some sort of sense of community, or is it simply, hey, here's your email with your workout for the week?
So it's app based, and they can go in. I tell it on the website. I reach out to them when they do sign up to the program. Like, you have any questions for me or for Nick, just send us a message, and we're happy to help you out and provide you whatever guidance, resources you need. And my right, wrong, and different, my cell phone number's on the website. People can reach out to me, and we've talked about it throughout, but I do have a sense of helping other law enforcement officers and getting them through the day, getting them through to their retirement. And I take joy in talking to them and providing whatever guidance I can provide them. And then oftentimes I get a lot back from them too, about their experiences and their feedback and things I can do to make everybody else better.
For the person who wants to come to your company, do you tailor it to, if you have access to a gym and if all you have is you can work out at home kind of deal?
So our both. So the pre-academy one is very body weight specific. You don't need a gym for that one. We do have the other ones that you do need some equipment for, but we also have an option too that Nick will build out a program for you, for your needs and for what equipment you have available. So the range of everything that's out there.
You mentioned jiu-jitsu multiple times. So are you training also?
I'm not training as much as I'd like to. I actually just talked to
all of us.
Yeah. I just talked to my professor yesterday and told him, man, I really want to be one of those people that can say I made it to a black belt. I'm currently a blue belt, and I do miss it. And I'm working. One of my struggles in life right now is overcommitting to things and making sure I can get everything I have in. I have 3 young kids. I have a wife, I have a job, I have a dose of ethos. My wife has all her own things going on. So trying to fit all these pieces into a day is a struggle that we all deal with. Right. But, jiu-jitsu is important to me. I don't commit to it like I should be doing, but I want to be.
From your organization standpoint, are they adopting more of the jiu-jitsu principles?
Yeah, we slowly but surely. That's, to me, it's kind of like wellness. Like, why are we accepting that? That's not how we used to do things. We're going to do the whole arrest and control, I think what's California, you do 4 hours of arrest and control every 2 years or something like that, and not enough for any of us to be proficient. And I think you see that in contacts on the street. You see people not being comfortable or courageous enough to feel competent to handle what they need to do. And so we have a new training lieutenant, also a jiu-jitsu guy. He just got his purple belt, and he's doing a really, really good job of incorporating jiu-jitsu more into our quarterly trainings. And we're definitely pushing towards that route, but much like our wellness program, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to fully embrace that, I think.
I say this a bit tongue-in-cheek, but after 30 years in law enforcement, I do honestly believe that the amount of, for most agencies, I'm sure there are others who have I think an agency in Atlanta has gone full opposite and are fully into jiu-jitsu or whatever. But right. Unfortunately, the amount you mentioned, the 4 hours every other year, is just enough to get those people who don't work out on a regular basis injured. Is pretty much what it is.
Yeah, when I think you need to take into consideration too, like we've been talking about the millennials and coming up, like they grew up very much, most of them have never been punched in the face, right? Because school fighting is a no-no, and not as regular as it was when I was a kid, probably when you were a kid too. And so you get a lot of new deputies that have had zero fighting experience. And we get very limited in the academy, right? And if they're not training jiu-jitsu and being comfortable with being close contact up front with somebody, and don't get me wrong, jiu-jitsu is not end-all, save-all.
No.
But it allows them to feel more comfortable in a fighting environment. And I think that's important. And like you said, the 4 hours every 2 years is not enough for them to do anything. Maybe sometimes some of them feel overconfident and they try to go do that takedown and it's not working because you're not turning your hips the right way or whatever, right?
Your opponent's not working with you.
Yeah. Or sometimes they're 5 times the size of you and you're like, wow, how am I going to deal with this guy? But I do believe in training jiu-jitsu. I think, and I give some guys a hard time that will go put thousands and thousands of dollars into our AR-15 or our handgun, right? And we will shoot that maybe once or twice in our career, maybe. But you will go hands-on with somebody multiple times a day, and you're telling me jiu-jitsu is too expensive. And I get it; it is expensive, but that's where we should be putting our money. But I do believe that also the agencies should be putting more attention and effort and funding into training their people more regularly in jiu-jitsu. And there are agencies that are, like you said, that are incorporating jiu-jitsu or being like, hey, we have open mat session every day from this time to this time. Come on over if you want to and get some time on the mats in. And so I think we're getting there, and I think you will see that in the next few years, is my hope at least.
I'm part of the group that started jiu-jitsu very late in life, and everybody that I know says this. I wish I would have started this X number of years ago. The other thing I will say is I've been very fortunate in my career. Yes, I learned in the academy boxing sucks. Getting nailed in the face sucks. I was very fortunate that I never ended up in a fight with somebody who really knew how to fight, or if they knew how to fight, they didn't choose to use it against me. But the one thing I will say for those who talk against jiu-jitsu, every fight I've been into as a cop has ended up on the ground. None of them have stayed standing.
Every single one. I much like you, I remember people squaring off on me, but I think I've been punched once in the face in 19 years, but even that one ended up on the ground. And I think there's a lot to using the leverage. I think there's a lot to learning how a person's body works and how to get them into a position, at least if anything, that you can hold on to them until your partners get there. Because the vast majority, especially in Southern California, agencies, your backup's going to be there relatively quickly. We're, thank goodness, I guess, not in some agencies like in Montana or Idaho where your backup may be 30, 40 minutes away before they get there. But
hell, there's some highway patrol officers working sections of California that your backup is 20 or 30 minutes away.
Yeah, true. And my belief is you should be training for that. I need to be able to take care of myself for that 30, 40 to an hour time frame. But nonetheless, but still we see cops that aren't even prepared to fight for
30 seconds.
Correct. And that's scary to me.
Any last minute or last pieces of advice regarding wellness from your experience and from starting a peer sport?
Yeah. So with individual wellness, we hear this a lot from very different or multiple different people on the internet right now, but just do something that's going to make you we use 1 degree better every day, 1% better, however you want to say it, but be a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. Understand that it is normal, especially for us as first responders, to deal with a lot of stress and deal with a lot of bad things, but we need to learn how to process those things and work through them. I'm a firm believer in therapy services. It's scary. It's hard to go in and express your emotions to somebody. But it is a a reliever. If you don't have therapy, find a good friend or somebody you're confident with that can be that person for you. But my point is just do something every day, physical fitness, eat better, whatever, that makes you that one degree better every day. For peer support, again, the one thing I can say is just be that person that is willing to do the buddy checks, is willing to listen, and willing to provide guidance and direction. Not be a therapy service necessarily, but be someone that can provide direction to somebody that's in need. And don't be afraid to check on people. And I think we've seen a lot of those law enforcement suicides where they were giving signs that the stuff's not okay, and nobody wants to check up on them. So that's the one. I think one big one is just be willing to check up on people and be courageous to have that conversation.
What's your website?
It's doseofethos.com, doseofethos.com.
And I'll put that in the show notes. But I appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best going forward.
Thanks, man. I was happy to be here. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.